So I stepped back and I asked myself, how can I increase price discovery and negotiated trade, which may or may not result in additional leverage, but minimize the negative economic consequences of negotiated trade. And the best thing I could come up with was bid the grid. I think it's important to note that the other reason we came up with bid the grid is that I think it really does protect the folks downstream in the cow-calf operation. Nobody has better genetics than the state of Montana, and the industry has done an incredible job of improving those genetics. And I can tell you, in all of our programs, we pay for those genetics, and we pay quite a bit for those genetics because we're also getting paid for those genetics. And so what I wanted to do was ensure that we can continue to have the progress within the industry of improving the herd and meeting consumer demands while at the same time getting everybody paid. And so I came up with the bid the grid concept. And the bid the grid concept uses the exact same specs as the CME futures, except two distinct things. One, we get paid for certified Angus beef, and two, we use the plant average for the yield as opposed to 63 to neutralize the variation between neutralize the differentiation in yields between plant to plant or company to company. And so I figured that if we use the specs that are wildly transparent, that the consumer or the user of this bid the grid has a place to go to find out those premiums and the discounts, and then in summary can neutralize the negative effects of just selling pure cash and getting back some of the premium they're paying to the producers downstream. So the goal is, one, to increase price discovery and negotiated trade. Two, attempt to find a means to increase negotiated trade with the least amount of economic per head harm. And in many areas, 80% of the cattle are getting premiums and discounts for carcass trades. We need to find a way to increase negotiation, which in turn increases discovery without creating a massive opportunity cost. And then four, continue to offer value-based alternatives so that the cow-calf producer can receive premiums for improving their herd genetics. And so my goal is to help us achieve this transparency and then help us hopefully one day increase the leverage as the supply and demand for shackle space realigns. It's an Excel spreadsheet that you can input, and so the CME specs is 70% choice. First 70% of choice goes to the packer. Anything above that you get paid on, and there's a scale based on the choice select spread as to how you get paid. There's a scale of premiums and discounts that are used to determine 1s through 5s, standard, stags, over 30, etc. So that premium is what you get paid for grading above 70% choice, having more 1s and 2s than less 3s, 4s, and 5s. And as a result, you can count on X dollars per head every time you put cattle on this grid. And then in turn, you will bid quality cattle accordingly so that you get something and the cow-calf producer gets something as well. The grid is generic, right? I believe it is the obligation and the role of the association, NCBA, to present the grid to the 4 major packers and say, will you accept this? And if they say yes, then nobody owns the grid. There's nothing proprietary to it. It doesn't cost anything to utilize it. It just has to be accepted by buyer, the packer, and seller, the feeder. The other important thing about the bid the grid is the platform which it will reside. And so we can have a platform that will reside just randomly. But I think what's important about the bid the grid concept and what we're working on in the NCBA group is it's not just about price discovery and negotiated trade. It's about real-time information. I think it's important that we disseminate the information, both the party that bought and secondarily the price in real time. I don't think it does any benefit to any of us sitting in that room or me sitting in this office in Colorado if I have to wait until the end of the day from the USDA to give me the trade that's occurred, right? We want real-time information, and I think that that's where the Fed Cattle Exchange can play a role. And if not the Fed Cattle Exchange, something very similar. So it doesn't have to be on my platform, but we're working on things to improve that platform. But it can be on another platform. So real-time information is just as important as the negotiation itself. I believe that legislation is not the right means by which to resolve our problems in the livestock industry. This would be mandate, if you will, or policy at the NCBA level. If we do go down the 50-14 path, if we go down the 30-14 path, I do believe that bid the grid should fall into the negotiated bucket. Should be considered a form of negotiation, because the packer will bid and the seller will offer, and they'll decide what that starting price is. It won't be generated off some 5-area average. The other reason this gives leverage is that the feeder is no longer turning cattle in. He's saying these cattle are here for negotiation. You can't count on them to go to your plant and die. These cattle can be bought under these specs. Do you want to buy them? So it does take away, if you will, some captive supply, while at the same time giving people the benefits of buying the genetics that they purchased. The first thing is a lot of there aren't a lot of bid the grids, and the packer hasn't been very accepting of negotiating that starting price, right? They say 5-area average, or Texas or Kansas. That's your starting price. This grid, we negotiate what the starting price is, and then we have a scale of premiums and discounts. Let me give you another thing that's important here is, if the packer doesn't accept this, I think we have a strong case here. He uses these contract specs every single day in size to manage risk. Why are these specs okay to manage risk, but not okay to purchase cattle on? And you can see where we're going here, right? It puts him in a tough position to not accept this because he uses these specs every single day. When we looked at the Fed Cattle Exchange, I don't know, 6-7 years ago, we heard from the packers that each plant has their own needs and that one grid wouldn't fit all. We fast forward to today, we have their attention. What I like about this grid is that the specs are really transparent. The scales of premium and discounts come from the USDA, and you can click on the link and you can see those premiums and discounts. So it's about transparency and discovery. And I think that that is better than trying to negotiate 4 separate grids with 4 different packers. In addition, from a risk management perspective, if these cattle on this grid trade $1.10, it gives a signal to the market, the futures market, and gives both speculator and commercial an input to properly trade the futures as opposed to flying in the wind. I believe the bid the grid should be a pedestrian type grid. It should be not as good as business to business relationships. It should be 95% as good. And so you should be willing to take a small variable sample each week and put it in there, because it only costs $2 to $5 a head as opposed to $30 a head in the traditional cash if you're mandated to 50-14 or 30-14. And I think the most important thing is it has the potential to make the starting price of your business to business relationship more robust, or at least more representative of what the market is. And then the last thing is, if the specs are the same as the CME and you do some risk management, there should be some incentive there to participate in the bid to grid that looks exactly like the CME specs. It really is the CME specs. It's putting the packer in the corner and saying, why won't you buy cattle on this? You use it every single day. How many futures did you trade today? And then he says, well, I traded 1,000. Well, you traded 1,000 futures with these exact specs, but you won't use those specs to buy cattle from ABC Feed Yard? It's a really undefensible position for the packer at that point. You say publicly you want price discovery. You say publicly you want transparency, but privately you don't. And I think with the association's help in them presenting this to the four majors, I think that that's the stick, right? No different than the stick of threatening 50-14. You have a spec that they utilize every day. And I think that that is the stick. Look, I think it goes back to that original thing. I buy 100 head from somebody and 50% of them I'm just going to get paid cash. My bid is going to reflect that, I would think. And then my bid is going to reflect getting the premiums on the other 50%. So I think the down, in the country, I think it needs to be said, look, you guys have spent a lot of money on genetics. You spend a lot of money on bulls. You have a lot of money in infrastructure. Let's make sure that you continue to grow, and let's make sure that you continue to get paid for those genetics. So that would be what I would want to help on, that this is good for the cow-calf sector. It's really good for the cow-calf sector. The other thing is it's studied, right? We're using different points from the Kuhn study that tell us that in Texas, we need 20,000 a week. In Kansas, we need 35,000. In Nebraska, we need X. In Iowa, we need Y. Right? These have been academically studied to determine how many head we need to trade to get robust price discovery. Nobody studied both the economic effects and the unintended consequences of 50-14. And similarly, nobody studied the positive or unintended consequences of 30-14. And I think it could set our industry back 20 years. And it could set your industry back in Montana even further because nobody's made the investment like you guys have. At a minimum, I want to see what I want to achieve the targets of the Kuhn study, which I know the Texas number off the top of my head, which is 20,000 head. And I think it's 30,000 in Kansas and it's like 40,000 in Nebraska. I definitely want to see those, because I know academically and through an econometric model that has been studied, it has been proven that equals price discovery, and I want NCBA to continue to fund the research so that is evolving. What if it's 25,000 next year in Texas? What if it's 15,000? But let's use a number that's been studied. Let's not use a number from some video blog that is trying to reach emotions. Let's use something that has been studied by the experts. No different than what we do when we buy a bull. We use the science to buy the bull to improve our genetics, to improve our herd. Let's use the academic research and the math to improve our business. Let's not use emotion. That's my belief.